The Thug by Rosemary Timperley. It was beginning to trouble her mind, haunt her dreams, and creep unwanted into her thoughts. She dreaded going out now, because she was almost sure to see him. His squat, drab little figure would be standing outside a shop, or at a street corner, watching the world go by, or perhaps not really watching, empty-minded. Impossible to tell. At first, she'd thought of him as the dwarf, but he wasn't quite small enough to be called that. He was the same height as some rather small women, but there was nothing in the least feminine about him, none of that sensitivity which marks the male who has a high proportion of female qualities, none of that sensitivity which marks the male who has a high proportion of female qualities. He was very much a man, despite his size. A strange, lonely, swarthy-skinned little man, standing around day after day, doing nothing. If he'd always stood in the same place, she could have avoided him, yet nearly always she caught sight of him somewhere, his flat hat, his conventional suit, his strong, thick arms held stiffly by his sides. She had never seen him on the move, but guessed that when he walked his arms would not swing. It would be as if he were saving them for something special. Although she found his existence disturbing, it did not cross her mind that he was aware of her as an individual, among other hurrying women in the busy streets, until the day when she came on him suddenly, turning a corner and almost falling over him, and he stared straight into her eyes. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said. His eyes held hers. She turned her head away and walked on. When she glanced back, she saw that he was still standing in the same spot, but his gaze was following her. A queer little shiver thrilled down her spine. The memory of his eyes stayed with her all day, narrow, penetrating, dark brown, and without feeling. If eyes really are the windows of the soul, she thought either he has no soul, or he has learned to draw curtains of deceit over those windows. It was on a Friday that she had first received this disconcerting stare from him, and on the Saturday, when her husband was with her, she saw him again. She nudged her husband. "See that dwarf-like person over there? He gives me the willies." "Why?" Her husband regarded the other man with indifference. "There's something peculiar about him." "Not really. It's rough luck on a chap not to grow to full height. One can't help feeling sorry for him, but he seems ordinary enough to me." "He gave me a funny look yesterday," she said weakly. "You're not unattractive," smiled her husband. "I've seen plenty of men give you the once-over in the street. Poor little chap probably thinks you look dishy, but the flowers are not for him to pick." "No, it wasn't a sexy look." "What then?" "Oh, I don't know. I'm just being silly." Her husband did not argue that one, and forgot the small conversation on the instant, little knowing that one day, if he had been able to remember it, it might have saved lives. Monday came, and she saw the man again. He was standing outside the store where she did most of her shopping. He looked hard at her, and she felt compelled to nod and say, "Good morning." He gave the faintest of nods, but did not speak. Her heart was beating uncomfortably fast as she went inside. Having made her purchases, she came out by a different door, and he was standing there. She jumped so much that her shopping bag jerked, and a couple of oranges fell to the pavement. Red-cheeked, she pursued them. She rescued one at the curb, the other rolled onto the roadway. Traffic was rushing back and forth, and she wasn't going to risk her neck for an orange. So she turned away, trying to look as if the wayward fruit was nothing to her. But the little man moved, arms straight down by his sides. He stepped into the road, ignoring an approaching car, bent down and picked up the orange. The car screeched to a halt. The driver shouted, "Want to get yourself killed?" The other took no notice. He returned to her and, unsmiling, handed over the orange. She noticed how large and strong his hand was. "Thank you very much," she said, "but you shouldn't have taken such a chance." Then he spoke to her for the first time, and his words were totally unexpected. "Will you come and see my carpet?" "Your carpet?" "Will you come and see my carpet?" he repeated. He had a flat voice with a slight Cockney accent. I'm afraid I can't," she began, but he broke in quietly. "Because I'm not tall does not mean I should be treated with contempt." "Well, of course it doesn't. I wasn't—" She recalled her husband's compassion towards the little man, genuine, albeit patronizing. Surely she could do the same. After all, he had rescued her orange at risk to himself. "Well, all right," she said. "Where is it? Do you want to sell it, perhaps?" Maybe she considered that was why he stood around. He wouldn't be allowed to sell carpets in the street the way they do out east. So possibly he picked on likely-looking customers there and invited them to inspect his wares. "No, I don't want to sell it," he said as they walked along. "I want you to see it. I only show it to special people. We haven't far to go." They turned down a side street and entered a house of bed-sitters. "I have a room here," he told her. "The basement room. My carpet is there." She followed him. As she followed him, she thought, "I must be mad to come home with a stranger like this. What's happening to me?" She felt afraid, yet ashamed of her fear, for she could find no rational justification for it. She told herself that he was simply lonely, desperate for company. It would be an act of kindness to look at his carpet, then quickly take her leave. They had descended a flight of stairs, which led from the ground floor, and now he opened the door of his room. "Here we are," he said, and she gave a gasp of sheer admiration, for although most of the decorations were dull and shabby, the carpet which covered the floor was beautiful, a tangible dream of many colors and designs. She guessed it had been woven by hand rather than machine, and must be valuable. They stood side by side looking down at it. "It's marvelous," she said sincerely. "Thank you very much for letting me see it. Where did you get it?" "From my father. My mother was English, but he was Indian. It is an Indian carpet. He and his fellow workers made it. That was when he was young. He was taught carpet weaving at one of the schools set up by William Sleeman." He looked at her as if the name should mean something to her, then said, "You haven't heard of him?" I'm afraid not." "Queen Victoria bought a similar one. You can see it in the Waterloo Chamber at Windsor Castle, but it's no finer than mine, which I didn't have to buy. It was passed on to me when my father died. I keep it to myself most of the time, but once a year in the season, and this is the season." He added thoughtfully, "I show it to someone special, someone worthy. This year I chose you." "Well, I'm neither special nor worthy," she said, trying to sound much more light-hearted than she felt. "But thank you very much. You must be proud to own such a fine carpet." "I am indeed. You see, madam, it is a thug carpet." The word thug startled her. She thought of thugs as those gangs of moronic youths who roam the streets looking for a punch-up. He read her thoughts and said, "The word thug is improperly used in this country. I am speaking of the real thugs of India. My grandfather was one. He regarded being a thug as a sacred calling, but the British didn't see it that way. They captured him and jailed him for life, along with many others of the sect. Then they collected the sons of thugs together, boys such as my father, and put them in schools to learn carpet weaving, brick making, building. Sleeman founded such schools, and thug carpets became famous." "But why did these thugs, what did they do to get themselves jailed? Were they robbers?" "No, they were honourable men. They killed travellers to serve their goddess Kali. She is the Hindu goddess of death. Every year, during the pilgrimage season, groups of men travelled the lonely roads of India. The thugs lay in wait for them and killed them. Then they would dismember the bodies and disfigure the faces, all in honour of their goddess, and then bury them. They would then encamp on the burial ground and hold a ritual feast called the Tupani. One delicacy at the feast was a gur, a kind of coarse sugar with holy properties, and those who had killed were rewarded with a portion of gur. If one who had not killed ate some gur, he was sent out straight away to find and kill a traveller." The little man described all this in a monotonous, unexcited voice, as if the thugs' murderous activities were all in a day's work. "Don't look so shocked," he said to her. "It was all in the day's work for thugs to behave so. It was their duty, the practical part of their religion. After all, if you worship the goddess of death, you've got to be present with the dead. But thugs didn't do it just anyhow, you see. They had a ritual method." "What was that?" She felt half hypnotized. "Strangulation. Each thug wore a scarf round his waist. When they were walking with a group of pilgrims they'd made friends with, a secret sign would be given. At that, one man would slip his scarf, it's called a rumal, round the victim's neck, and, with the help of another man, would draw it tight. Meanwhile, a third man seized the victim's legs and pulled them backwards, flinging him face down onto the ground. He couldn't resist. Death was swift. Now, there were usually more than 3 thugs to each pilgrim, so not everyone was lucky enough to have the chance to kill each time. They had to be patient and wait their turn. But then they were patient types. Out of the season they led innocent lives, very ordinary and peaceful. One was even a devoted nurse to some British children. He took periodic leaves to visit a sick mother. The family got the shock of their lives when they heard how he really spent his leaves. He seemed so gentle, they said, but then the word thug in Hindustani means one who deceives. Their everyday behaviour was to mask, was to hide what really mattered to them, and that was killing for Kali. Was it only pilgrims that they murdered? I don't like the use of the word murder. In this connection, murder has a base motive: robbery, jealousy, frustrated lust, or sheer sadism. Ritual killing is quite different. The motive is of the highest. It is the most sincere form of worship. Sometimes they felt human pity for their victims, but they wouldn't let that get in the way of their religious duty. However, to answer your question, in the early days of the sect, they killed any traveller at all, except people in certain categories. They spared women because Kali was a woman, lepers, the blind and disabled, anyone driving a cow or female goat, and any craftsman whose work was protected by Kali: gold, iron and brass workers, carpenters, stone cutters and shoemakers. But as the number of thugs increased and there was need for more victims, those old rules went by the board. My father told me that my grandfather had killed women without turning a hair. Kali needed the dead. That was the main thing. I can show you a photo of my grandfather. He drew a faded photograph from his wallet and passed it to her. She saw a tall, well-built figure clad in a white blouse and baggy trousers, a turban on his head and a sash round his waist. The man in the photograph had a beard, but otherwise his face was very similar to that of his grandson, who now stood before her, while the beautiful carpet seemed to blossom at their feet. She pointed to the sash. "Is that the scarf which—" "That's right, yes. That's the rumel used for strangling. My father managed to preserve one of those old rumels and gave it to me as a memento of my grandfather. This is it." He unbuttoned and removed his jacket, and she saw that he was wearing a sash identical to the one in the photograph. She burst out, "I don't know how you can endure to wear something that's been used to murder people. It is murder." "I wear it so that I always have it handy," he said. "You don't need to have 3 thugs to kill one victim. One can manage perfectly well on his own if he's had plenty of practice." And with a movement so rapid that she had no chance to resist, he stripped the rumel from his body, flung it round her neck, crossed the ends, and pulled with all his might. He rolled back the carpet and buried her in a grave already prepared under the floorboards. It was not the only one, but at the moment the only empty one. He then replaced the carpet carefully as any housewife and settled down to a solitary ritual feast, which included some of the precious gur, that sugar which, once tasted, confirmed a man to thuggee for the rest of his life. While he feasted, he prayed to Kali. He knew that she was pleased with his offering and would now protect him until the next season, when she would demand another sacrifice. On the following morning, he stood in the shopping street as usual and watched the people go by. He even watched the husband of the dead woman enter the police station and smiled within himself without moving his lips. He took deep, satisfied breaths. He always felt immensely fit after a ritual killing. His goddess was with him, and the rumel hugged his waist. The police could find no clue in the case of the missing wife, who had simply disappeared while out shopping, and when, in the following year, another housewife mysteriously disappeared, they did not link the 2 cases, nor link them with women who had vanished from home in previous years. After all, there were no bodies, and women quite often did leave their husbands never to be heard of again. And never the least shadow of suspicion fell upon the thug. He was such a very familiar sight to the local police. They even nicknamed him Dopey, after one of Snow White's 7 dwarfs. They didn't take him seriously, and pitied him all the more for his small stature, because they themselves were attractively tall. So the little man stands in the shopping street like a familiar landmark. He is watching and waiting, waiting for the next season when Carly will become restless and demanding, and he will do her bidding. At this very moment, there is a young woman who shops daily in that street, and keeps noticing him. She even tries in vain to avoid seeing him without quite knowing why, and already he is beginning to trouble her mind, haunt her dreams, and creep unwanted into her thoughts.